Hello again, I'm Bob Weir with another interview of People in the News in North Texas. My guest today is Jim Buckington, Chief Operating Officer of Bridges to Life, a 501c3 faith-based nonprofit organization dedicated to end recidivism in our prisons. Thank you for being here, Jim.
Thank you, Bob, for having me.
If you would please begin by telling our viewers something about your background and how you got started in Bridges to Life.
Sure. I'm in a unique position. I'm the son of a victim of crime as well as the son of an offender of crime. When I was in junior high school, my mom was found murdered, and unfortunately my dad was the offender. He hired two men to kill my mom and myself and my two brothers, and only my mom was the one that was murdered, and my dad then ended up on death row. And as well as the two shooters that were involved also went to prison. And so I actually started volunteering with Texas Victim Services to go into prisons to just share my story of what I went through as a victim of crime, as well as the son of being an offender of crime. And so that's what got me started. And then I met a lady on staff on Bridges to Life who invited me to a graduation ceremony of this 14-week program, and soon after that I started volunteering. About 15 years ago I've been a volunteer with Bridges to Life, and then about 3.5 years ago I came in to become the COO of Bridges to Life.
And this is about bringing victims and offenders together.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, so part of our 14 weeks includes 4 separate weeks of victims of crime coming into the prison to share their story about what they went through as a victim, how it impacted them as well as their family. And the victim will share their story, as well as they volunteer with us and sit in a small group with 10 offenders in each small group and participate in the 14-week program.
All right, Jim, tell us about recidivism rate in Texas and the country. I know it's in terrible shape. So many people are going back to prison again and again.
Yes, in a lot of states, in fact, the national average is anywhere between 38 to 50% of men and women that go to prison actually go back to prison. If you go through our program, our 14-week program, our recidivism rate is only 14.5%. So the great news is if a man or woman participates and graduates from our program, 86% of them never go back to prison. So it's been very effective.
Well, yeah, that would excuse me, that would make it a very valuable asset to the country at large, because we spend billions of dollars on prisons, yet they fail in their primary job is rehabilitation. I mean, that's what it suggests, and yet they fail in it. So we certainly need to have something done about it, because this is such a threat to society. How many offices do you have in Texas?
So we're actually in 13 states and 6 foreign countries. So we're pretty spread around the world. Most of our prisons are actually in the state of Texas, because the state of Texas has a lot of prisons. I think we're almost 100 facilities in Texas that we're in. And so we have 20 staff members that run our program. Most of them are in the state of Texas. We do have 1 staff member in Indiana, but all of our other states and countries are run by volunteers. We've actually had about 2,600 volunteers participate in our program.
And how many are currently enrolled in the program across the state?
Sure. This year we're going to anticipate about 7,000 offenders that are going to complete our program. To date, since inception, we're actually end of this year we're going to have 50,000 men and women graduates from our program.
50,000. How is that? What's the percentage of that compared to the others in the state?
Sure. So right now there's about 140,000 men and women in Texas prisons. We're going to have about 7,000 graduate this year in the Texas system.
And being able to help people not violate again is a big deal. I mean, it saves the taxpayers not only a whole lot of money, but in terms of their own safety, it's really important. So, do you train volunteers?
Yes, absolutely. What if it's a Texas prison, the Texas prison system actually has about a 2-hour training class for any volunteer that goes into a prison, just to go over the common sense rules of what to do and not to do in a prison, and to keep them safe. We also, through Bridges to Life, will conduct a new volunteer training program as well, to prepare them to facilitate our program. And what it looks like, we actually have 10 offenders with 2 to 3 volunteers in each small group.
Do you see differences between men and women offenders that take the program?
Well, yes, it's interesting. Each week we have a different topic. Our topics are responsibility, accountability, confession, repentance, forgiveness, reconciliation, restitution. How do you pay back after you commit an offense? And what really happens is each week the men and women will share their answers in our curriculum. We have a Restoring Peace book. We also have a study guide. And so each week that study guide has 8 or 9 questions that they will have answered before we come to the program. And it's interesting, women offenders that take our program very soon open up and take responsibility for
More
their
quickly
actions.
than the men.
Than the
Yeah.
men. The men it seems to be a few
So
weeks
Jim,
later.
there's a theological component to your program?
Sure, we are
Okay.
faith-based.
Faith-based, okay.
But we're not a church or a Bible study. It's
Sure.
really just, in fact, we address folks that don't have a faith in prison,
Right.
and say just read it as a moral story. We have some Bible scriptures on the topic.
Based upon the principles of the
Absolutely.
Bible.
But we do believe that God can provide forgiveness and healing,
Sure.
both to the victim side as well as to the offender side.
Let me ask you this, are there many victims that are unwilling to meet with those who victimize them?
Sure. Texas does have a victim offender dialogue program where you can actually go into prison if the victim wants to, and the offender has to be willing to do it as well. And you can meet privately and have a dialogue, a discussion. However, that doesn't happen very frequently, but what the beauty of our program is, when a victim comes into our program, their particular offender is not in the room, but men and women that have committed a similar crime are in the room. And so if you're a victim of armed robbery, you're kind of like a surrogate victim and surrogate offenders that are in the room. And so when that offender hears the impact of an armed robbery victim, the offenders never thought about it from the victim perspective. And what happens is they'll get empathy for the victim. And so it's really important to bring victims and offenders together in an environment and have a different perspective and discussion on that crime.
And the offenders often indicate that their feelings of guilt for what they did?
Absolutely. A lot of, not all offenders, but a lot of offenders are in a mode of denying responsibility and accountability.
Right.
They either blame somebody else,
Sure.
deny it, minimize it, rationalize it. But what happens in our program is when they hear the victim perspective, the focus actually shifts away from themselves as an offender to the victim side.
How about the relatives of victims? Are they invited to participate?
Sure, anybody can volunteer in our prison system, whether you're a relative of a victim of crime or you were actually the direct victim of crime.
How about this? Are the offenders rewarded with lighter sentences if they join the program?
They don't necessarily get a reduced sentence. However, we have noticed that the parole board looks favorably on men and women that have completed our program because our recidivism is so
Sure,
low.
because it would indicate some sort of contrition.
Lower
on their
risk,
part.
exactly. Now, it's not a guarantee they're gonna get parole.
Sure.
But there certainly is a lower risk of somebody that takes our program.
Well, if they didn't want
Because of
to
recidivist.
enter the program, would mean that they weren't sorry.
Right,
Perhaps for what they
completely
did.
voluntary program, it's
All
not
right.
mandatory.
Well, Jim, we're coming down to the end. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Well, we're very effective. I think when you bring volunteers in with offenders and spend that kind of time, we meet once a week for 2 hours. it really makes an impact. On the volunteer side, they make a difference, and on the offender side, they actually change, and we're in the life change business.
Well, all right, I thank you for coming here, Jim, and for all of your efforts to help improve a system that we really need improvement on. The recidivism is killing the country.
Right.
I mean, this is a serious problem. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, appreciate it.
And thank you for watching.